The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. Please welcome Dave Toscano, who's the Minority Leader in the House of Delegates. Welcome, David.
It's great to be back, Woody.
Last Saturday, I understand you attended a special session, a very special session in Williamsburg, Virginia. Tell us what that was all about.
Well, every 4 years we do a commemorative session down in the old House of Burgesses building in Williamsburg. This is the old Capitol where the Burgesses, the House of Burgesses met and the Senate met, and Thomas Jefferson and Patrick Henry was governor at the time. And we conduct just a mock session where we consider, we actually hear from speakers at the time and just commemorate the fact that we are the longest sitting consecutive deliberative body in the Western world. So it's a great experience for all of us to get down there again. That chamber is pretty small, let me tell you.
And you happen to hold the Thomas Jefferson seat, do you not?
That's right. Thomas Jefferson represented all of Charlottesville and Albemarle County when he was in the House of Delegates in the 1770s, and this is one of the successors to the Jefferson seat. So it's quite an honor.
Now, you were re-elected Minority Leader by your colleagues. What kinds of additional responsibilities does that bring to you?
Well, I'm responsible for handling all the debate on the floor, organizing the debate every day, trying to articulate the Democratic message, trying to provide people with the, shall we say, the rest of the story because the Republicans are in the majority, and also trying to protect the integrity of the institution because it's important as we debate these critical issues that we try to keep it together and institutionally be civil, present our points of view, but not get personal, not be so divisive that we can't get things done. That's important for the future of the Commonwealth.
Now, at the beginning of the session, I believe the House adopted some new rules on transparency at the request of the Speaker. What were those rules about?
Well, you know, a number of us have been pushing for these for a long time. A lot of us are always very concerned about the timeliness of being able to read bills. And, you know, budgets would typically, that would be that thick, would typically be dropped on our desk and we have to vote on them within 2 hours. That's really not a way for the public to be involved in knowing what's in a bill or for the legislature to be involved in knowing what they're voting on. So a couple of years ago, a number of us pushed for a 48-hour rule, a rule that said that the budget bill has to stay on the members' desks for 48 hours in advance of a vote, so you can see what's in it. We also have other transparency measures that say that when a budget bill eventually goes to conference, so that you've got the Senate and the House, a small group of people coming up with a final budget, it has to be disclosed in that final budget if there is anything that was not in either other's budget. In other words, you can't have somebody sneak something in at the end and then everybody misses it and you're voting on something that you're not aware of.
The Virginia, in his address about the state of the Commonwealth, talked about the need to pursue a new Virginia economy, to diversify our economy, to wean our way off the federal largesse. How's your district doing? How's the Commonwealth doing?
Well, Woody, as you know, it used to be in Virginia, when we came out of a recession, we would come out of it more robustly and faster than any other state in the country. Well, in this most recent recession, that was not the case. A lot of that had to do with the federal government cutting back on procurement, contracts with companies in Virginia, and expenses related to military. So we didn't get the jolt of money coming in the aftermath of the recession that allowed us to come out that fast. The result has been somewhat of a diminishment of revenues for our budget, and challenges about how we fund education, transportation, things that people consider important. For my area, it hasn't been so bad. I mean, Charlottesville is outperforming a lot of the Commonwealth of Virginia. I mean, we have the university, it's an economic engine. We've got a lot of, it's measured growth. It's not outrageous growth, but it is growth. And you're seeing a lot of economic activity in Charlottesville, Albemarle. Other parts in the Commonwealth are more problematic. Northern Virginia seems to be coming back now, but you look at South Side, Southwest, they've got very serious problems.
What are some of the ripple effects, economic ripple effects that the University of Virginia brings to the Charlottesville, Albemarle County area?
Well, first you have people, and those folks, whether they're professors or staff, they're largely paid for by money that's coming from another part of the state. And so that money that is paid to those people circulates in the local economy. Secondly, you've got building. And the universities are always building, they're always expanding, building new dorms, whatever they are. That employs a lot of construction folks. And then you've got students who spend money in the local economy. So that's always very good for our region. Now, you don't have that same kind of growth in other parts of the region, and that's why this governor and a lot of the legislature is talking about building this new Virginia economy that is not as dependent on federal largesse. And that's why you see almost every day the governor is out there making another announcement on jobs, creating economic activity, and so we can diversify our economy and make it stronger.
What about the concept that's being pursued entitled Go Virginia, the regional cooperative effort?
I think that's a great effort that's underway, and of course it's designed to encourage regions to work together. When a company is going to locate in Virginia, they're not looking at the boundary lines between, say, Charlottesville and Albemarle or Suffolk and Chesapeake or whatever. They're looking to locate in a region. And we're all better off if those local governments and the local chambers of commerce work together to recruit new businesses or to expand existing ones, recognizing, the only way you're going to do this is to try to entice people together. And that's part of what Go Virginia is about, is economic activity, growing this new economy, creating new opportunities for folks in the Commonwealth.
The governor has also proposed additional monies for education, K through 12 community colleges and our institutions of higher learning like the University of Virginia. I take it those monies are sorely needed. We're still playing catch up from the recession.
You're absolutely right. I mean, education is right in my bailiwick. I've got two great school divisions I represent. I've got a community college in our area that's really top-notch, and of course we have the flagship institute university in the Commonwealth. And if you take K-12 education, the governor has put $850 million, new dollars, in K-12. That's in part to try to get us back to where we were back in 2007, 2008. Our per pupil state spending is not as great now as it was back then.
Wow. And
if you adjust for inflation, it's about 15% less. We had to let go about 5,000 teachers and staff between 2007 and now because of the problems in the economy and the budget. The governor's got 2,500 new people in his budget that will be employed as teachers across the Commonwealth. He's got a 2% raise for teachers. He's got money for helping schools that are challenged schools. And we have to recognize that increasing numbers of our schools have large percentage of kids on free and reduced lunch. They have special challenges. We've got English as a second language kids in the schools. They have special challenges. You have to put your money where your mouth is. And this governor has done that with K-12. We can talk about higher ed whenever you want, but that's another section which I think is critically important to the budget.
What about the need in K through 12? And I think the governor used an example of a 14-year-old who had learned how to code in elementary school. He's talking about a new way of educating our students.
Well, yes, on the policy side, there's a lot of discussion about the high school of the 21st century. And there's a lot of new thinking about how you create this kind of continuum of educational opportunities that gets people to a point where they have a job that pays a really good wage when they get out. You know, that's why we hear so much about credentialing. You don't want to create a credential that a person trains to get, but there isn't a job when they get out. So there's a lot of movement to try to figure out how's the high school interact with the community college and the university to give these youngsters these opportunities that a lot of them really don't have right now because there's a lot of flux in the economy.
Let's jump to higher education. More funding there. How is there still a rising cost of tuition here in the Commonwealth?
Well, I think people rail against the rising cost of tuition, but what they don't understand sometimes is part of it has to do with the fact that we have been underfunding higher education for years. And anytime there's less state money that's going into the pot and you've got increasing costs, somebody has to make up the difference. That somebody is usually the parents of the kids are going to school and the kids themselves. So this governor has more money in the budget to help draw down the cost of tuition. The other thing he has is money that will help try to reduce the student debt because, again, the higher the tuition, the greater the student debt. Now, a lot of us think we want to that we have to create incentives for people to finish because you don't want to get them stuck. They borrow a lot of money and then they don't finish because then they can't get the job to pay it back. So there are a lot of moving parts, but the governor has about $175 million in new money for higher education that speaks to this concern. It's got also money in there for teacher raises, both K through 12 and in higher education, again, to fund those people who make the magic happen in the classroom.
Now, you talked about credentials, and of course our community colleges play a role in credentialing people in terms of certifications. Talk to us about the relationship between our community colleges and the institutions of higher learning. I know there's a 2+2 program. Right. There are other programs that encourage youngsters to go onto an institution of higher learning, but also encourage them to get a certificate.
Right. And a four-year school is not for everyone. And sometimes people who get a credential or a certification out of a 2-year community college experience will earn more money than somebody who goes through and finishes a 4-year degree in a program that may not be as marketable. So we have to allow people to find their passions. The community college is a great way to start for folks. They can explore some of their ideas, their passions, and it may lead to a certification, or it may lead them to pursue a 4-year degree, which is fine. I mean, we need people in all different categories here. And of course, people in 4-year degrees, they may want to go on to graduate school, medical school, what have you.
I take it that cybersecurity, for example, is an instance where someone can get a certificate and earn a really good salary these days.
Well, absolutely, and there are other things too. I mean, defense analyst, we've got a local program in our community college that gives some training for people who can take jobs in the defense industry. Cybersecurity is huge, huge. There will be lots of jobs in cybersecurity, and that doesn't necessarily require a 4-year degree. So we want to, create these opportunities for people that may not have existed in years past.
So we still want to maintain a balance, however, between science, technology, engineering, math, healthcare, and the arts, right, and these certification programs.
Sure. All of these things make up the quality of life in a community. You can't neglect the arts. The arts are critically important in my area. I mean, we are an art-centric community. I mean, the arts are really important in Charlottesville, Albemarle, and they really, they enliven the community, make community a special place to be. So we have to invest in those things too as we try to give educational opportunities to people.
Now, there's another move through a constitutional amendment to reform the way that charter schools are
Right.
chartered in the Commonwealth. Where are we in terms of that issue?
Well, we're going to be considering that. That's a constitutional amendment, which means it has to pass in 2 successive legislative cycles separated by an election. This will be the second passage, which means if it's passed by the legislature, it will go on the ballot this fall. What people have to realize is that there are charter schools in Virginia. They're not that many. We have several in our area that work very well. But the constitutional amendment will take away local control of the ability to create or deny a charter school. That control will then rest with the state. So if people don't like the notion that the state ought to dictate to them how they run their educational system, they ought to vote against this amendment. If they like giving up that control, then they can vote for the amendment this fall, and the state will be able to charter those schools independent of what the local school division thinks. Now remember, right now, charter schools are paid for by the locality. Now it's not at all clear whether charter schools chartered by the state are going to be paid for by the state. So the locality may be having charter schools, being forced to have charter schools that they've got to pay for that they don't agree with.
Sort of like the match that occurs if there is a teacher raise, for example. The
Right.
locality is responsible for part of that as well.
Yes, yes. And you know, you hear a little bit of grumbling from the localities. They say, okay, yeah, it's nice to have a 2% teachers raise in the budget, but that means we got to come up with money too. But that's always been the part of the deal in Virginia. The state puts up money, the locals put up money. And the locals oftentimes put up more money than their match. I mean, Charlottesville and Albemarle have not really felt the effects of a lot of these cuts statewide because the local governments have been willing to step up and put some more money in the mix to make sure their school divisions are strong. Some localities can't afford to do that.
Now, you serve on the Courts of Justice Committee, and there have been some interesting issues recently debated there. One relates to drones. One relates to judges,
Right.
Supreme Court judges. Talk to us about those two matters.
Well, the drones, that's in courts now, but it's coming. I haven't really heard all there is about the drones, but I've heard a lot about the Supreme Court justice. You know, we are in this position where we have a sitting Supreme Court justice, Jane Roush, out of Northern Virginia, eminently qualified. She presided over the Malvo trial, the sniper, Washington sniper. She's done a lot of very sophisticated litigation that she's presided over. And Governor McAuliffe appointed her to be a judge about 6-7 months ago. And since that time, the Republicans have been trying to oust her for reasons that are unbeknownst to me. In fact, they've never said that she's not qualified. And in fact, just last week, the House Courts of Justice Committee unanimously said that she was qualified to serve as a Supreme Court justice. Now, that needs to be played out. She has not been ousted yet. There is the possibility that she will remain on. There's also a possibility we won't appoint a judge before we leave here, in which case the governor will do another recess appointment and will probably be her.
Interesting. House Resolution 75, I think it's a religious freedom issue
Right.
you're working on.
Yes, that was my resolution has passed the House, and it's a very interesting resolution because when I heard presidential candidate Donald Trump make the comments about how he didn't want Muslims in the country simply because they were Muslims, you know, I've got fairly upset, as a lot of my constituents did. So I put together a resolution to try to get the House of Delegates to be on record that we don't oppose Muslims coming into this country just because they're Muslims, that under the statute of religious freedom that Jefferson authored, you know, people have their right to practice their faith as they so desire. We also, this country has also been the sort of the beacon of freedom around the world and the home for people who feel politically persecuted in their own countries. We don't want to lose that. That's part of what makes us special and exceptional. And so this resolution was designed to deal with that and speak to that, and it passed the House of Delegates last week.
Now, I wanted to discuss with you briefly this controversy surrounding concealed carry permits. The Attorney General issued an opinion about a month ago or so, which which had the impact, as I understand it, of invalidating the reciprocal agreements the Commonwealth had with about 25 states. Now I understand that there's a potential resolution of that matter through some legislation reached with the governor and the leaders of the General Assembly. Can you give us some history, background, and detail about that?
I'll try, and it's a little complicated. But the first thing to remember is the Attorney General was acting within the law when he did what he did. There's code language that says the Attorney General and state police have to review these reciprocity agreements. He did that. And he decided that he wasn't going to accept reciprocity agreements from states that have had lesser controls on concealed weapons than Virginia. He didn't want a place like Montana or Alaska that had less stringent controls dictating to us how we should enforce the carrying of concealed weapons in the Commonwealth. But he stirred up a hornet's nest. There were a lot of people very, very upset, and including people in Virginia who carry concealed, who are now worried about whether they could carry concealed into Tennessee, because Tennessee wouldn't recognize our concealed weapons permit. So the NRA approached the governor about trying to work out a deal, and a deal has now been struck. The bills have been drafted, and they're coming to the House and the Senate. And under the deal, the reciprocity arrangement will return essentially to the old law. There won't, the Attorney General will not be able to undo the reciprocity. And in exchange, the people who are more supportive of gun safety measures will get a measure that gives more protection to domestic violence victims than they have right now in terms of their abuser being able to possess a firearm. Right now, that abuser can. And it will allow for voluntary background checks at gun shows by private sellers who see a person who wants to buy a gun but is a little worried about whether that person should be having a gun. They can call the state police, who are standing right over there. State police will automatically do that background check. It's not mandatory, it's voluntary, but it's a lot farther than a lot of people thought we'd ever get.
So that domestic abuser violator will be required to transfer his firearm?
That's right. And they will be prohibited from possessing or transporting one. Not only if you own one, but you can't hold one, and you can't drive around with one. And there was a loophole in the state law that allowed you to possess the firearm, even if it wasn't yours.
So, and to some extent, the other part of the agreement addresses the so-called loophole at
Right.
gun shows.
Yes.
Meaning that if I'm a private seller, I have access to a state police officer who can run a background check if I'm concerned about selling a gun to you or someone else.
Exactly. Right now, it's licensed firearm dealers at gun shows have to do the background check. But if you're not a licensed firearm dealer, and there are a lot of people there who sell guns who aren't, you don't have to. And this kind of closes that loophole by saying if you're a private seller and you want to get that check, you can have the state police do it. We think that will become the best practices at the gun shows to make sure that nobody sells a weapon to somebody who shouldn't be entitled to get it.
Now, you also serve on transportation. There are a host of issues there. How is the 2013 transportation legislation being implemented, in your opinion?
Well, it's very interesting because so much of the legislation that's being proposed this year has to do with tolling in Northern Virginia.
Yes.
Which is not something my constituents think about all that much. But it's the #1 project in the whole Commonwealth in terms of congestion mitigation, economic development in Northern Virginia, and trying to find a way to fund the building of those roads without making the taxpayers pay for everything up front. What's important for my constituents to understand is that if we don't permit tolling in Northern Virginia, the only way to build that increased capacity up there is to take money from other parts of the state, like Charlottesville, Albemarle, Roanoke, South Side, whatever, and suck all that money up to Northern Virginia to build those roads. And that would not be a good thing for people in my region who want more transportation improvements, more transit, other things that people consider important.
You mentioned one of the factors in determining a project is congestion mitigation. There are other criteria, are there not, that was established by, I think, House Bill 2?
Absolutely. The importance of the criteria differ depending on the region. So in a region where you don't have as much congestion, which would be kind of in our area, I mean, we have too much congestion, but it's not as much as Northern Virginia, safety might be one of the bigger concerns. In Northern Virginia, it's all about congestion mitigation, you know, because they have just huge problems with that. But we don't have the same problems. So we judge our projects a little bit different than what they would judge their projects.
And there's also a proposal, I believe, to convert 395 after Springfield into a hot lane, and there's some people who are complaining about that as well.
You know, and again, you know, it is natural for people to be worried about this stuff because they're worried that something they were able to do for free today, they're going to have to pay for tomorrow. Now, there's a lot of confusion about I-66, and actually the way the governor's made his proposal on 66, which is opposed to 395, is that you will be able to continue to do the same things you were able to do before if this tolling goes through. You will be able to get an option for tolling, but you don't have to take it. And I think that's probably going to be key to selling that proposition up there. My folks, you know, they go to, you know, Washington every once in a while. You know, they'll watch for this. The tolling might make it more, you know, easier for them to get in. They won't have to wait in congestion as long, but, you know, they're not as concerned about it.
And so these public-private partnerships are the way to go, it appears, in order to ensure that the taxpayer has less risk in terms of that huge financial hit.
Right. And what we're trying to do as legislators is to make sure that as you go forward with this the private option, you don't set up a dynamic where it costs so much money to use the tolls that people really feel aggrieved. Because, you know, there is no free lunch. I mean, you either pay for it with taxpayer dollars or the people who use the roads pay for them. For my region, you know, if we had to use taxpayer dollars to be taking money out of what we want to do locally, so that if you have the tolls up there, a private company comes in, they build the road, and the people up there who use it pay for the road.
Great. Well, it's been a pleasure having you here again, Delegate David Toscano, the Minority Leader in the House of Delegates. Good luck in the remainder of the session.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.
Mm-hmm.